Boris Johnson says he will keep going as Prime Minister, despite the double blow of two crushing by-election defeats. With a swing of almost 30%, the Liberal Democrats took the previously rock-solid Tory seat of Tiverton and Honiton, overturning a massive Conservative majority. And Labour have taken back Wakefield, the red wall seat they lost at the last general election.
Historically, in the last 50 years, more, you've seen governments being punished at the polls during midterm when people are particularly feeling economic pressures. And I totally get that.
But in another blow to the Prime Minister, the Conservative Party chairman resigned from the cabinet straight after the by-election results, saying someone must take responsibility. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the Tories are imploding. With the Prime Minister out of the country in Rwanda, we'll be asking if this is a moment of political peril for Boris Johnson. Also this lunchtime, Ukrainian troops are ordered to retreat from the key eastern city of Severodonetsk. Figures just out show another big rise in the number of COVID infections in the UK. 1.7 million people had the virus last week. And welcome back to Worthy Farm. After 3 years, it is the long-awaited return of Glastonbury.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, can Emma Raducanu repeat her US Open Championship exploit at Wimbledon? She'll face Belgium's Alison van Uytvanck in the first round.
Hello, good afternoon. Boris Johnson says he will keep going as Prime Minister, despite the double blow of losing two by-elections in one night. The Conservative Party chairman, Oliver Dowden, resigned from the cabinet immediately, saying someone must take responsibility. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the Tories are imploding. Well, let's just take a look for you at the results. And in Tiverton and Honiton, the Liberal Democrats won by more than 6,000 votes. Now, they overturned the previous Tory majority of 24,000. That is the biggest majority ever overturned at a by-election. And meanwhile, Labour took back Wakefield with a majority of almost 5,000 and a swing of about 13%. Wakefield is one of the so-called red wall seats which had switched to the Conservatives at the last general election. Our first report this lunchtime is from our political correspondent Nick Eardley, who's in Tiverton. Nick.
Ben, for the third time in a year, a comfortable Conservative majority has been beaten by the Liberal Democrats. The one here in Tiverton and Honiton last night was huge, 24,000 at the last election, and by winning last night, the Liberal Democrats overturned the biggest majority ever to be beaten at a by-election. It's left people asking questions about the future of politics here and the future of the Prime Minister.
It's time to show Boris the door.
Subtle, this is not. After a famous by-election victory, there's no disguising the delight among Liberal Democrats here in Devon.
It's great to be in the Liberal Democrat seat of Tiverton and Honiton.
They've overturned a colossal majority to win this seat for the first time in a century, and their leader says he knows why.
People on the doorstep were telling us that they think we can't have in our great country a Prime Minister who's not decent, who's not fit, who's a law-breaking, lying Prime Minister and who's dishonest.
How much was this a protest vote against the Prime Minister?
It was two things. There were people who were voting against the Prime Minister, I've made that very clear, but there were people who were voting positively for the Liberal Democrats.
4,000 miles away in Rwanda, the Prime Minister is with the future King. Despite two electoral blows and the resignation of a cabinet minister, Boris Johnson says he wants to get on with the job.
Yes, it's absolutely true that we've had some tough by-election results, and they've been, I think, a reflection of a lot of things, but we've got to recognise that voters are going through a tough time at the moment. And I think that as a government, I've got to listen to what people are saying.
But not everyone is happy with business as usual. This man was the Conservative co-chairman until this morning. But Oliver Dowden tweeted his resignation just after 5:30. He wrote, "Our supporters are distressed and disappointed by recent events, and I share their feelings. We cannot carry on with business as usual. Somebody must take responsibility." These are a really problematic set of results for the Conservatives because they show the party losing support in different parts of the country. In the north of England, in Wakefield, and here in the south, in Tiverton and Honiton, in what should be safe Tory territory. And many Conservative MPs will be looking at their majorities this morning nervously and asking themselves, not for the first time, is Boris Johnson still the best person to lead them into the next general election?
Well, we could march on Downing Street. What do you think?
This is a big result for the Liberal Democrats, but it also raises more questions about the Prime Minister's future. Nick Eardley, BBC News, Tiverton.
So, as we heard from Nick there, it was a double defeat for the Conservatives last night. They also lost the Wakefield by-election in West Yorkshire to Labour. The Tories had won the constituency at the last general election, one of the so-called red wall seats. Let's go live to our political correspondent, Ian Watson, who is there for us this afternoon. Ian.
Well, Ben, against the backdrop of a cost of living crisis and the fact that 4 out of 10 of Boris Johnson's own MPs want him to go, it's perhaps unsurprising that Labour found this fertile political territory here in Wakefield, but the scale of their victory is what the party insiders want to emphasise. The majority is twice that than when they held this seat back in 2017, for example, and much bigger than they had anticipated at the start of this campaign. That therefore gives them hope that they can now win back some more of these leave voting seats come the next general election. The question is, though, whether some people are transferring their allegiances temporarily or whether there's a permanent shift back to Labour. So I've been asking voters here in the market town of Ossett, and indeed asking the Labour leader himself about the potential significance of his victory.
Labour has routed the Conservatives.
Wakefield has turned red. At the last election, Labour lost a seat for the first time since 1932, when the Conservatives promised to get Brexit done. But now voters felt it was time for a change. Keir Starmer chose the market town of Ossett for his visit. Here, Labour wasn't just winning back lost support, some former Conservative voters backed the party for the first time.
What a team you are. What a candidate. Not a candidate, what an MP.
Labour's Simon Lightwood achieved a swing of more than 12% from the Conservatives. Amidst the understandable euphoria from his supporters, I reminded the Labour leader that big by-election successes don't always lead to general election victories. Now, back in 2012, let me remind you of Labour's by-election success of Corby. 12.7% swing, exactly what you got here. Can you remind me of what the subsequent general election was?
Well, yes, of course, but this is hugely significant for the Labour Party, and I'm so proud that we can present that confident Labour Party utterly focused on the voters. That's what I wanted to achieve, and this is evidence that we're on course for a Labour government.
Those voters are saying that they are defecting to you as a protest this time. It's a lack of enthusiasm for Boris Johnson, not enthusiasm for you.
On the back of that result here, that swing, I'm afraid that argument just doesn't carry.
So what led voters here to move away from Boris Johnson?
That time the Conservatives just woke up and listened to the people.
Well, I think the Partygate didn't help, and I think there's a loss of trust.
Over the years I have voted Conservative. Now we're retired, you know, want a stable life. I think we need something done with the economy.
While some believed Boris Johnson had behaved badly, nonetheless they remained loyal.
I'm not in favour of him at the moment, but on the whole I think he's better of the two.
I'm not saying whether I'm Conservative, Labour or who I am.
So how did Labour win? Well, some of the leaflets reminded people that the previous Conservative MP was now in prison. They also campaigned on local issues and flooded the constituency with volunteers. And in the more traditionally Conservative parts of the constituency, Labour asked people to lend them their vote to oust Boris Johnson. So far, it's only the party chairman, Oliver Dowden, who's gone. But not everyone who wanted to protest against the Prime Minister voted Labour. Instead, some of them shopped around for alternatives.
The decline in the Conservative vote is more than twice as big as the rise in the Labour vote. And it looks as though quite a lot of voters in Wakefield who were unhappy with the Conservatives took the opportunity to vote for an independent candidate.
Labour believe they're well on the way to regaining the trust of lost voters, but retaining it may be a bigger challenge. Ian Watson, BBC News, Wakefield.
To Westminster now, and our political correspondent Ione Wells, who's there. Ione, assess for us where these two results leave Boris Johnson. He says he will keep going. Will his party allow him to?
Well, Ben, on the surface, he can't face another no-confidence vote for a year unless Tory MPs were to force a change to the rules that govern their Tory leadership contest, which could take some time. But that doesn't mean that any political fallout is over by any stretch. Now, months of headaches for Boris Johnson over Partygate, over the cost of living, have been put to the test in two elections in very different parts of the country, in Wakefield in the north of England, in rural Tiverton in Devon, both exactly the kinds of seats that the Tories need to hold on to if they want to win a big majority again. Now, some allies of the Prime Minister today trying to be optimistic, saying these results were priced in and it's time to move on. But I think there's two things that could put the Prime Minister in jeopardy. One is, do more of his backbench MPs move against him? For those who have already called for him to go, these results just kind of solidify their position. But the ones to watch are those who have publicly been pretty loyal so far, particularly those in more marginal seats in the north of England, trailed by Labour, or in the south, trailed by the Liberal Democrats, who are now fearing, in some cases, for their jobs too. Second question is, do any other government ministers follow Oliver Dowden's lead and resign or express their discontent publicly? Certainly privately, some have told me over the last couple of weeks about some of their unhappiness over Partygate, over wanting lower taxes, over plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. Do some of those who have these sort of private concerns continue to peg their fortunes to the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson? These are all questions which are still outstanding at the moment, but I think the unanimous message that I'm hearing from Tory MPs today is they all want a kind of clear signal for the Prime Minister about how he plans to turn their electoral fortunes around. OK, Ione, thank you very much. Ione Wells there. Other news now, and Ukraine has ordered its troops to withdraw from the strategically important city of Severodonetsk in the eastern Donbass region amid the continuing Russian offensive there. That is according to the top Ukrainian regional official. Well, the capture of Severodonetsk has been a key Russian war aim ever since its forces had to pull back from their positions around the capital, Kyiv, early on in the war. This report is from our correspondent in Ukraine, Joe Inwood.
These are the last days in the battle for Severodonetsk. This video, released by Ukrainian troops, complete with rock soundtrack, is how they wanted to portray it. But it seems these fighters from the National Guard have not been able to hold the line. They have been given the order to withdraw.
Now is the time when staying at positions long after they have been destroyed, just for the sake of staying, is pointless, because the number of casualties will keep on rising every day.
Soon, the Russians will be in complete control of the wasteland they have created. This once busy industrial city is in ruins. And it's not hard to see why. This footage, filmed and released by the Russian authorities, shows a thermobaric rocket launcher. The firepower they have been able to unleash on the Donbass, and the Ukrainians trying to defend it, has been overwhelming.
The Ukrainian resistance is pointless and useless. I think that with the momentum our troops have now gained, we can say that in the near future, the Luhansk region will be liberated.
But this will not feel like liberation to many in Luhansk. Their region is in ruins, and Ukrainian troops still hold the city of Lysychansk. The Ukrainians are now putting their hopes in new equipment from the West, especially these HIMARS, long-awaited precision missile launchers. They are said to finally be on the front lines, although too late for Severodonetsk. Joe Inwood, BBC News, Kyiv.
Figures just out show another increase in COVID infections in the UK. More than 1.7 million people had the virus last week. And our health editor, Hugh Pym, is with me now. Hugh, another big rise in the numbers. How worrying is this?
Yes, Ben, a significant increase in COVID infections picked up by the household survey done by the ONS, seen as the most accurate guide to what's going on. So let's look at the main number in terms of the infections in the UK last week, and there were 1.7 million people in the UK estimated to have got the virus, and that was an increase on the previous week of around 23%. Now, that increase is quite a big increase, but we should bear in mind that there was quite a big increase the previous week as well. So there are 300,000 extra people having the virus last week. The previous week, the increase was 400,000. But even so, this is potentially beginning to be a bit of a concern, but hospital numbers do remain relatively extremely low compared to where they were back in the recent winter and the winter before that. But they've gone up from around 500 a day in the UK at the end of May to about 1,000 a day. And the number of patients staying in hospital with COVID is also higher, though we should bear in mind some of those people have gone in for other types of treatment or conditions and have tested positive. So where do we go from here? Well, the view of Professor Jonathan Van Tam is very interesting. Till recently he was Chief Medical Officer for England. He did an interview with the BBC and he says the authorities will be just taking quite a balanced view of things as they are right now. Here's what he had to say to the BBC.
It is benign at the moment in the hospital sector in relation to COVID, then from that perspective, I think they'll have to say, well, this is part of how we're beginning to adjust to living with this virus.
Professor Jonathan Van Tam there. Living with COVID is what we've heard from ministers. He said it again today. It's an interesting prospect for the next few years that COVID is still around, although thankfully not nearly so many people getting seriously ill. OK,
Hugh, thank you very much indeed. Hugh Pym, our health editor. The killer of the schoolboy Ricky Neve has been jailed for life with a minimum of 15 years after the murder almost 28 years ago. Ricky's body was found in woodland near his home in Peterborough in 1994. James Watson, who is now 41, was 13 when he strangled the 6-year-old. Now, just over 10 years ago, Jude Tebbert was kidnapped by Somali pirates and her husband David killed. But Jude has always believed the man jailed in connection with the case is innocent. Well, the BBC has now seen a report from the police watchdog into the actions of a senior detective in the case. The IOPC report suggests Neil Hibbard omitted forensic evidence from Ali Kololo's trial. Here's our special correspondent Lucy Manning.
It is more than most could bear. Jude Tebbert was kidnapped in Kenya. She watched her husband David dragged off to be murdered. Then she fought to have the only man convicted in connection with his killing released. She believes he's innocent. At the centre of this potential miscarriage of justice, a highly decorated British police officer, Detective Superintendent Neil Hibbard, investigated for leaving out key forensic evidence at the Kenyan trial.
He knows what he's done. They've put a man in prison who shouldn't have been put in prison, so they have to live with that. I put my faith in them, and I do believe that they would find the killer of David and the people who took me.
I didn't know he died.
In 2011, Jude was held hostage for 6 months by Somali pirates. A Kenyan man, Ali Kololo, is in prison, but his lawyer says for a number of reasons it wasn't a fair trial. This was the Tebberts' last photo together. In the days after the murder, a Metropolitan Police team flew to Kenya to investigate, led by Neil Hibbard in the suit, the key witness for the prosecution. The police watchdog said he failed to include evidence that cast doubt on whether a footprint in the sand where the Tebberts were taken was Ali Kololo's.
I was brought up to trust the police and our judicial system. They always get it right. But this is a harsh reality that they don't, and they haven't in this case.
In a ruling seen by BBC News, the police watchdog, the IOPC, says a disciplinary tribunal could consider Mr Hibbard's statements at the trial in Kenya had the potential to mislead the court. He has now retired, but it said if he'd still been serving, he would have had a case to answer for gross misconduct. It says a tribunal could find Mr Hibberd failed to act with integrity, and that could justify dismissal. Does it disappoint you that Neil Hibberd isn't going to be accountable for what he did in Kenya?
No one's going to be accountable. You know, for ruining someone's life for 10 years.
And I guess ruining your chance for justice as well.
Yeah, yeah. I thought I would feel a sense of closure, a sense of justice. But for me, that's not going to happen. And I think that's why I'm so sort of passionate about trying to get some justice for Mr. Kalolo.
Through his lawyers, Neil Hibberd said he absolutely disagrees with the findings. Jude Tebbert has shown resilience over the last decade and won't stop until the man she believes is innocent is freed. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
And the time is just 21 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. Boris Johnson says he will keep going as Prime Minister despite the double blow of 2 by-election defeats. And England make inroads at Headingley in the 3rd Test against New Zealand.
Coming up on the BBC News Channel, some of the world's best players have been banned from the Scottish Open and fined £100,000 for playing in the Saudi-backed Rebel Live Golf Series.
They are an extraordinary sight in our countryside, often to be seen gliding gracefully overhead. Now, British-bred red kites are being flown abroad to Spain, where their numbers are dwindling. Red kite chicks will swap the forests of central England for southwestern Spain, where it is hoped they'll breed and boost the population there. Here in the UK, red kites have had a remarkable change in fortunes ever since they were almost wiped out 3 decades ago. Here's our environment correspondent, Helen Briggs.
Soaring high in the sky above the countryside, living proof of a conservation success story. 3 decades ago, red kites were rescued from the brink of extinction by reintroducing wild birds from Sweden and Spain. Dr. Ian Evans was one of the pioneers.
It all went out of expectation. It was such a huge success, which was, amazing. And obviously the birds in Spain, unfortunately, in the last 30 years haven't done so well. So it's a great opportunity to go back and, that's why we went to Spain in the first place, to save kites. And we can do that now by helping them with the kites we've got here.
At 6 weeks old, the birds are naturally shy in the presence of humans, behaving as they would around predators. The birds are protected under law, and conservation experts were given special permission to take them out of the country.
It's a great honour to have been involved in this project right from the start, and you just feel really proud of the fact that you can actually do some good for the environment and for such a marvellous species. I mean, there's not much more magnificent than a kite soaring above you.
This ancient forest is the perfect habitat for red kites, and they've thrived here since they were reintroduced in the 90s. The red kite chicks will be flown to Madrid, then taken by road to Avery's, where they'll spend a few weeks perfecting their flight before they're released into the wild. The first arrivals are settling in the Spanish countryside and are due to be released over the summer.
You need about 90 to 100 birds to create a sustainable population in a given area. So this is the start of a 3-year project. 30 birds will go this year, and we hope 30 birds in each of the next 2 years will also go to Spain. And that should be sufficient to create a new breeding nucleus of the birds.
It's hoped they'll flourish in their new habitat and help secure the future of red kites across Europe. Helen Briggs, BBC News, Northamptonshire.
The Prince of Wales has opened the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit in Rwanda for 2 days of talks on issues including trade, climate change and health. While speaking at the opening ceremony, Prince Charles expressed his personal sorrow over the impact of slavery.
I cannot describe the depths of my personal sorrow at the suffering of so many. as I continue to deepen my own understanding of slavery's enduring impact.
Well, live to Kigali now, let's join our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell. Nick, what was the significance of this speech, would you say?
I think unquestionably, Ben, this was a significant speech for two particular reasons. First, on slavery, this was a speech, remember, given to an audience in which there were many African and Caribbean leaders. The Prince said that the conversation about slavery had come to, it was a conversation had reached its moment in time, and he said he wanted to recognise the wrongs of the past and expressed his own personal sorrow. And then on constitutional matters, well, 14 Commonwealth countries, apart from the United Kingdom, have the British monarch as their head of state, and to them he said quite directly, it is entirely a matter for you whether you continue as monarchies or become republics. Now, he said that before, but the significance, I think, was in the timing. This is the future British king saying that he recognises that the winds of constitutional change, if you like, are stirring in some parts of the Commonwealth. And I think it is Charles, as the future head of the Commonwealth, wanting to put his mark on these particular issues.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Nicholas Witchell there, our royal correspondent in Kigali. Now, England's cricketers continue their quest for a clean sweep series victory against New Zealand. They are trying to dismiss the tourists in their first innings at Headingley, and at lunch on day 2, New Zealand are 325 for 8, and Joe Wilson is watching.
The anticipation of a Friday morning. What could possibly happen next at Headingley? Well, what's that?
Oh, down it goes.
Basically a dropped catch between Ben Foakes and Joe Root. It was Daryl Mitchell England had missed. Bowler thinks, am I ever getting some luck? Well, Matthew Potts, keep going. Now, is that out LBW? Is it? Yes, said the umpire. The technology problems meant batter Tom Blundell couldn't review the decision. England gave other batters second chances, another drop. Michael Bracewell reprieved. England not quite fulfilling the occasion. Advice is always available from experts in the stands. Jack Leach to the left, in good-natured conversation here. England spent much of the session trying to convince the umpire the ball was misshapen. He eventually agreed, gave England a different one. This is what Stuart Broad did with it. Catch held, Bracewell out, point proved. Broad's 36 today, lots of experience.
Tradition tells us that Test match cricket can't always be fast and furious. There's still a place for patience, surely.
In the final moment before lunch, the exceptional Daryl Mitchell on 109 tried for another boundary and found Ben Stokes. Patience finally prevailed. Joe Wilson, BBC News, Headingley.
Now, after a 3-year wait, it is finally time for the main events at Glastonbury to get underway. Performances have begun on the main stages at Worthy Farm in Somerset, with 20-year-old Billie Eilish set to make history as the youngest solo headliner tonight on the iconic Pyramid stage. Well, Colin Patterson is there for us this lunchtime. Lucky man, Colin.
Yeah, the music has finally begun at Glastonbury. Ziggy Marley has just treated the Pyramid stage to an hour of reggae classics. Huge crowd. This afternoon, it's the turn of Crowded House. The sing-along to Weather With You, that should be quite something. And then Billie Eilish, the American, will tick off another British cultural milestone. She's already done a Bond theme. Tonight, she headlines the Glastonbury Festival.
After a gap of 3 years, music has returned to Glastonbury, the Libertines opening the other stage. Also on there today and playing Glastonbury for the third time are Blossoms.
Until you come here, I think people don't really understand it, but like, we came in 2019 even when we weren't playing just to enjoy the festival, so after the couple of years we've had, it's just like, it means more than ever now.
Last night, Mel C DJ'd to a packed tent and told me that the Spice Girls really want to play the Glastonbury Legends slot, filled this year by Diana Ross.
It's the dream.
Really?
It's the absolute dream. Yeah, we would love to do it. It's the biggest stage in the world. You know, we have the best festival in the world right here.
If you got Glastonbury, do you think you could get Victoria back for that one performance?
I have a good feeling.
Tonight, at the age of 20, the US superstar Billie Eilish headlines the Pyramid stage, and her fans stake their front row places at 10 in the morning.
We got a bag full of snacks and drinks, so we're going to be fine.
What is it you love so much about Billie Eilish?
I think just the fact that she's going to be the youngest headliner, and I think just her energy, what she stands for in terms of not letting criticism get to her.
I think she's just very much like herself all the time, and I think her music resonates a lot with like people, especially like our age. I would agree.
While 15 miles up the road in the town of Frome this afternoon, the Saturday night headliner, Sir Paul McCartney, is playing a warm-up show in an 800-capacity venue.
I'm not on Facebook or Twitter, so I didn't know he was going to be here.
Well, I didn't know anything about it till I saw it on the news.
When he steps onto the pyramid stage, it will be to a crowd of over 100,000. Colin Patterson, BBC News, Glastonbury.
Well, how's the weather for Glastonbury? Let's find out with Louise Lear.
Behaving itself so far, Ben, in actual fact. Look at this Weather Watcher picture. I'm very impressed that people are sending us Weather Watcher pictures from Glastonbury. Thank you very much. But bright enough skies, but clouding over a little, and there could be some showery rain later on this afternoon. But just take a look at Highland Scotland. Absolutely glorious here at the moment. Doesn't that beach look very inviting? And that's because the best of the sunshine has been through eastern Scotland, eastern England as well. Thicker clouds, some rain starting to push into Cornwall and into South Wales. So eventually towards Glastonbury as well. But ahead of that, we've still got some heat and humidity. And to the east of the Pennines, we could see a few sharp, thundery downpours being triggered off this afternoon. And if you get those, they really could be quite torrential at times. So that's certainly worth bearing in mind. That's where the highest of the temperatures are likely to be, 25 or 26 degrees. A little bit cooler and fresher out to the west. Here, we're looking at mid to high teens. Now, it's that fresher air that's going to spread its way steadily northwards. It will bring some showers through the night tonight, but clearer skies. So temperatures will hold up into double figures, but you'll probably notice the difference quite widely across the country. So we start off the weekend dry, settled, sunny, but low pressure anchored out to the west will be driving in some stronger winds along west-facing coast and eventually some showers, chiefly out to the west to begin with, but they may well just filter a little bit further north and east for the second half of Saturday. A slightly fresher feel, generally 18 to 22 degrees, but in a little more shelter in the east with more sunshine. That's not going to feel too bad, and hopefully Headingley, there's fewer showers around here, so we're going with definitely the glass half full. I think the weather will be largely fine and dry. But if you take a look at Glastonbury for tomorrow, it wouldn't be Glastonbury, would it, without some showers in the forecast? But that, in actual fact, is not too bad at all. So as we move into Sunday, we've still got that low with us, and this time it could bring more persistent rain, particularly into the west. And around that low, we've got some pretty strong winds. So it's going to be a blustery day on Sunday. The far south and east is always going to see the best of any drier, brighter, sunnier moments. There'll be some wet weather moving in from the west, affecting all western areas as we go through the day. Some showers ahead of it. If you dodge your showers and keep some sunshine, again, low 20s quite possible. But that low pressure not going very far, very fast. I'm afraid it does look likely as we go into next week that the temperatures will be down on where they have been just of late. Plenty of frequent showers into the north and west. If we are going to see the best of the sunshine, it's likely to be in the southeast. Enjoy your weekend. Ben.
Louise, thank you very much indeed. That is all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One now, we'll join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a very good afternoon.